I'm just back from a Mediterranean cruise on Sun Princess from Barcelona to Naples. As on all my cruises, I was delighted to chat to followers of my channel and new travelers that I met. Unfortunately, not all of whom were having the perfect cruise. Why? Because too many had made mistakes that I have seen time and time again on the 25 Mediterranean cruises I've been on to date. So I decided to put this together to help anyone planning a Mediterranean cruise to avoid these particular traps and mistakes that I see people doing. Welcome aboard. I'm Gary Bembridge, and here's the 7 things you need to watch out for if planning a Mediterranean cruise. A key mistake making Mediterranean cruises not going to plan is cruises not being on the right itinerary for them, or by finding it too short, something several I spoke to on Sun Princess were finding. Most Mediterranean cruises tend to be 7 nights long. Some run from the same port and back, while others have a 7-night cruise running back to back with another on different routes, enabling cruises to put 2 cruises together to create a 40-night cruise that does not repeat ports. For example, my Sun Princess cruise was 7 nights from Barcelona to Naples, but then had another 7-night cruise tagged onto that with different ports that ended in Athens. Also, most cruisers who get frustrated on Mediterranean cruises have not appreciated there are 3 main routes to consider. The first is the Western Mediterranean, which is what I recommend for any first timer to the region, because over a week you visit multiple countries and experience a range of cultures and visit many iconic places. Western Mediterranean cruises could include Barcelona, Marseille, Nice, Monte Carlo, Florence, Pisa, Cinque Terre, Rome, Naples, Palma de Mallorca, Gibraltar, Ibiza, and so on. The second key itinerary is the Eastern Mediterranean and the Greek islands. This is a beautiful itinerary and is perfect for a second Mediterranean cruise. Places called on could include Sicily, Malta, various Greek islands, Athens, and Kusadasi and Istanbul in Turkey. The third key itinerary is the Adriatic, which is one of my favorite itineraries. These usually operate between Venice and Athens, calling in places like Croatia to see Dubrovnik and Split, Kotor in Montenegro, and some of the fabulous Greek islands. However, I often see that even if people choose the best option for them, they do not spend enough time on the detail of the itinerary and so miss out on seeing places that are best or better suited to them. For example, many people on that Sun Princess had chosen it because it was their first one in the region. They picked it because it was a Western Mediterranean cruise correctly, but it was not necessarily the best use of their 7 days, as it only called on Gibraltar, Marseille, and La Spezia, which is the gateway port for Florence and Pisa. And then it had 3 sea days. So they didn't get to see that many more places because they could have seen up to 3 more ports if they'd gone on another itinerary instead of having 3 sea days. On my previous Western Mediterranean cruise to this one, I was on Norwegian Viva, and people on that got to see many more ports. We saw Rome, we saw La Spezia again for Florence and Pisa, Monaco, Palma, and Ibiza. So as a first timer, choosing a more port-intensive cruise will mean seeing more of the Mediterranean in the same time. This leads me to the second big reason many Mediterranean cruises do not go to plan, which is people not thinking through that some ports on the itinerary they will not get to see or explore at all. Too many people I meet miss out experiencing major and iconic ports by not building in a pre- and post-day in the embarkation or disembarkation ports. So even though these major ports are listed on the itinerary, they think they're going to see them, they do not actually get to see anything of them. Let me give you the example of that Sun Princess cruise. It started in Barcelona and it ended in Naples, the gateway to the historic Pompeii, Herculaneum, the Amalfi Coast, Capri Island, and so on. However, without stays in both of those, cruises saw none of the sites. I met several people frustrated that they hadn't built them in and they were missing seeing those 2 places. I see this on every Mediterranean cruise I've been on, including people embarking or disembarking in Rome, Athens, Venice, Istanbul, Genoa. As there's also the ability to do Mediterranean cruises out of the UK, with Southampton being the common port, you'd actually need a pre or post day in London to see anything of my home city. Many of these Mediterranean cruise embarkation and disembarkation ports, including Southampton, have another big issue that I see leading to many Mediterranean cruises not going to plan. But before that, I just wanted to mention my favorite free-to-use online resource that I use to track and record all my cruises like the Sun Princess one, called the Cruise Globe, available at thecruiseglobe.com or via their iOS or Android app. Here you can see that Sun Princess cruise. Here's the one I mentioned on Norwegian Viva, but it shows up all my other Mediterranean and worldwide cruises as well. So what I do is I now input every cruise I've been on, and then they use AIS satellite tracking data. It shows me exactly where my cruise actually went. I can also see then how many countries I've visited, ships and lines I've been on. I can even replay my cruise route. It's completely free to use at thecruiseglobe.com. They've introduced a live tracking function, so you can now follow cruises while they're underway. I can input all my future cruises, so it automatically adds them once done, and so on. So back to that issue about why so many Mediterranean ports mean people cruises do not go to plan. Many do not appreciate that many ports on a Mediterranean itinerary are far from the places and sites, often hours away. Those used to cruising in the Caribbean and Alaska are used to cruise ships docking close to the town and very close to the sites, with lots of things to do close by, often simply within a short walking distance. This is not true of many of the Mediterranean ports, and the cruise lines actively disguise this. In cruise line published itineraries and route maps, they usually show in bold or first the name of the attractive, iconic port or place, like say Rome, Florence, Venice, and then in brackets behind it the name of the actual port. So glancing at your itinerary, it looks like you'll be docking right by these famous places, but bear in mind you're not. Here are the main ones that you should watch out for if planning a cruise. Venice is one of the most complex, as there are several ports that you may be at based on your ship size. If you're on a very small ship, like a Sea Dream yacht or a Windstar ship, these are the only ones able to dock within Venice at the San Basilio cruise terminal. Slightly bigger ships of up to about 1,000 passengers, like Viking, Seabourn, Regent, and Azamara, are likely to dock at the Fusnia cruise terminal in Marghera, an industrial area on the mainland. But all the rest will be docking in the Ravenna or Trieste, which are about 2 hours drive from Venice. Another port people get thrown by is Rome, where ships dock in Civitavecchia, which is around 1.5 hours away based on traffic. If your itinerary says you're going to Florence and Pisa, you dock in La Spezia or Livorno, which are up to 2 hours away. If you think you're docking in Athens, you're not. It will be in Piraeus, which can be up to about 45 minutes when traffic is bad. If you think you're sailing to and from London for your Mediterranean cruise, going from Southampton, well, actually, that's 1.5 hours away. But it's also important to understand that unlike the Caribbean and Alaska, quite a few Mediterranean ports are actually unattractive working container ports with little of interest around them at all. In some, such as say La Spezia, on my last Sun Princess cruise, we even had to get a shuttle from the ship to the port gates because walking within the port was not allowed. While in Marseille, as it's a commercial port far out of town, there was nothing in the area, so taking a shuttle bus into town was required because it was some distance away. So many people I meet on Mediterranean cruises are disappointed by not researching and planning for ports before the trip. On the upside, by the way, for those that have not done much planning, many ports now do have a hop-on hop-off bus, which will come right to the ship as an option. But for many ports, to get the most of them, you're probably going to need to book excursions, whether that's a cruise line excursion or independent providers like ventureashore.com, viator.com, or shoreexcursionsgroup.com. Those are some of the leading providers. By the way, if you do explore those different options and you decide on shoreexcursionsgroup.com, use TFT5 at the checkout and you'll get 5% off their tours. But as I mentioned, there's quite a few that you can look at. Also, I found things do not go to plan for many used to cruising in the Caribbean and Alaska, because they expect to find lots of tour operators actually at the ports, so they can sign up there and then to tours. This is not as common in Mediterranean ports. This also means that Mediterranean cruise line excursions from the ship do fill up fast, so you should research, plan ahead, and book them before boarding. Not staying on top of things is another reason some Mediterranean cruises go horribly wrong, including not even being allowed to board them. This is by not keeping up to date with the constantly changing rules, requirements, fees, and costs affecting Mediterranean cruise itineraries. There are 3 key things to look out for, and they do keep changing. First, one I saw disrupt a cruise just before I went on Sun Princess. That is new requirements coming into force to enter a country. Carnival Miracle was boarding a Mediterranean cruise that ended in the UK. But boarding was shambolic because many people had not got the newly introduced UK ETA, Electronic Travel Authorization, and were being refused boarding. The ETA is now required to be allowed to enter the UK. Europe is rolling out a similar one called ETIAS, though it's been postponed into 2026. But if cruising from then on, you need to check if one is going to be needed based on the country that you're coming from. So always check on your local government travel advisory site, as that will tell you if you need anything based on your passport. If flying into Europe for Mediterranean cruise, you will also be affected by the new EU EES entry-exit system, requiring people not from an EU country to have their photograph and fingerprints taken when they enter. The second thing to keep a lookout for is countries and ports on Mediterranean cruise itineraries introducing new fees or restricting the number of ships that can call on them. Now, some countries and ports did this abruptly last season, meaning some lines had to change itineraries at short notice, dropping and changing ports, because when they, of course, planned and launched the routes a couple of years ago, those restrictions were not in place. For example, Greece brought in fees and limits on ships for Santorini and Mykonos, while Palma and Ibiza cut the number of ships allowed per day. So cruise lines had to abruptly change plans. The third is ports bringing in visitor fees to explore the sites. The most significant to date is Venice, who have a fee in the peak months on certain days, which must be paid to enter and explore the city in advance. Now, I'll leave a link to the site with details how you pay in the notes of this. But some other ports are considering this too. This leads me to the next reason why for some people their Mediterranean cruise does not go to plan. Ports are bringing in those limits because they are being overrun, not just by cruisers, but by all tourists. Many, when booking a Mediterranean cruise, don't appreciate how hot, humid and busy the peak summer months of July and August are. Many European countries effectively shut their factories, close down the businesses, and people all go on vacation in July and August, making the sites, the restaurants and the beaches in Europe really, really packed. This time of year, it will also be between 30 degrees Celsius to 40 degrees Celsius. That's 87 to 104 degrees Fahrenheit. It's very humid, and many people going on Mediterranean cruises find this rather challenging. A common reason, and one I saw on Some Princess, that many Mediterranean cruises do not go to plan is simply because people are on the wrong line or the wrong ship. As basically every cruise line has ships in the Mediterranean during the season, the choice is enormous. It ranges from large resort ships from the likes of Royal Caribbean down to small luxury yacht lines like Sea Dream. But being on the wrong line or ship in the Mediterranean could ruin a trip. For example, Some Princess is a new megaship from Princess. It's a different ship to the other Princess ships. It's aimed at younger cruisers. It's aimed more at families. It's more boisterous, and it's not as relaxed as their other ships. So I met many regular Princess cruisers who were on Some Princess that were not really enjoying the ship and the trip, but they could have gone to the Mediterranean on a different and older Princess ship that better matched their needs. It's really important to think about and check the line and the ship will really meet your needs in the Mediterranean beyond just the ports it's calling on before you book. One watch out though is that in those peak months, particularly July and August, even lines which are usually more adult focused will have many more families on those months, even the ultra luxury ones. So bear that in mind, because if you prefer a more adult only cruising for the Mediterranean, then you do need to choose an adult only line at the peak times like Viking or Virgin Voyages, or you could sail in the shoulder months, out of school holidays like June, September, October. I do have many people asking me about cruising the Mediterranean out of season, so autumn and winter. There are very, very few options, with Europe-based lines like MSC Cruises and Costa running a couple of itineraries, but choice is very limited because the season really runs from April to October. I've mentioned a few areas where not researching and planning could make a Mediterranean cruise not go to plan, but there are a couple more that I really must stress. Ships get full in the peak months, so if you want a specific cabin, for example, for accessibility needs, solo, a family room for kids, booking way in advance is absolutely essential. Secondly, flight costs to and from Europe get really expensive the closer to departure gets. I met a couple of people on Some Princess who'd left their flight booking late. It had absolutely blown their budget apart. As you get ready to plan your Mediterranean cruise, I spoke about the importance of getting the ports right. So join me over in this video where I talk about the best and the worst ports when choosing your Mediterranean cruise. See you over there.